I'd heard rumors that the Pope was coinciding his retirement with an investigation of gay papal authorities. That's actually in the news over here. I don't know what is in the news in Europe, but that's what they're reporting here. So I don't know what the implications are with that, why he should step down just because they're investigating certain people in the Catholic Church who happen to be gay. No implications were made in the news.
But, I mean, I think the first thing is, when was the last time a pope retired?
600 years ago.
Exactly. These people are meant to be appointed by God. How do you retire? I mean, seriously, if you're appointed by God and you retire, are you not telling God he made a mistake?
Well, there you have a problem. You see, the Pope is infallible. And God's infallibility, I don't know how they clash with God's infallibility.
Oh, I've got it. You've seen the film Dogma, yeah?
Yes.
Yeah, the film Dogma, absolutely fantastic. So all we need, seeing as the Pope is infallible, is all we need to do is get the Pope to say that there is no God. And then God will cease to exist.
But then he wouldn't fallible. So that's a paradox, right?
Yeah, it's a tricky one, isn't it?
I want to talk about something related to the Pope, but not directly related to his resignation. It was on the news recently here locally that there was a prediction back in 12th century. It was published in 1595 that there were a certain number of popes before the resurrection and return of Jesus, and according to this prophecy of the popes, which was supposedly made by Saint Malachy, a 12th century archbishop. This is the penultimate pope. In other words, there's going to be one more. All we know is that he will be called Peter the Roman, and then Jesus will return in the beginning of the apocalypse. So yet another one. 2012 has come and gone, right?
Did I get that right?
It's time for the apocalypse to come.
Peter the Roman.
Peter the Roman. That's the last one on the list.
So there is currently a guy walking around who's called Roman. Peter the Roman?
No.
And when was the last guy called Roman?
You can't be so literal. You have to reinterpret these prophecies after the events have already happened. And then it will be completely obvious, Like you rearrange the letters of Roman and assign each of them a number. And then you add the numbers together, and you add the sum of all those numbers together. And then it will spell out the actual name of the Pope. Jeez, Thunder, I've done this before.
Yeah, aren't you allowed to add a random number in there as well at some point?
Well, yeah, I mean, as long as it's 7, 9, 11, 3, or 2. You couldn't add 5.
So it doesn't really matter.
I really think
it doesn't
we're all
really
wasted.
matter that the Roman Empire fell. What was it, 600 years ago, 700 years ago, something like that?
A little more than that, I think.
700?
I mean, my European history is not as hot as it used to be, but...
Funny that there's a 7 and 2 zeros there. Thunderfoot has 2 zeros in his name. So
yeah, the second I become Pope, the world will end.
Do you remember the end of the previous Pope, where you couldn't really even tell if the guy was alive? It was like Weekend at Bernie's, if you remember that movie. I mean, the guy could have died 2 years into his papacy, and most people wouldn't have known the difference because he was just sort of hunched over all the time, whispering his blessings or whatever into the microphone. It would be really easy for a good ventriloquist to have faked that. What I like about this retirement is that the guy's going out while he's still in command of all his faculties. We don't have to drag through these obviously inattentive popes, or popes who are obviously letting people behind the scenes do all the ruling. And maybe this will open the door for someone that's a little more progressive. Maybe we'll see them recant the whole birth control thing.
How could we possibly replace Pope Benedict? I mean, for Americans, that's just the greatest name for an atheist to choose a pope. We couldn't choose one with a better name than Pope Benedict. And what was his last name? Ratzinger. Can we get a better movie villain? Really? I mean, this is the Pope that atheists dream about. He looks exactly like Darth Sidious. He was a Hitler Youth, literally. This guy is the ultimate villain for...
No. I think you underestimate the Roman Catholic Church's ability to rise to the challenge. I think they can do better. I think they... I'm not sure how, but they'll do it somehow.
Pope Blofeld. No, Mr. Bond. I expect you to die.
Yes, that's right. Yeah, the next Pope will stroke a white pussycat forcefully.
Okay, that kind of that burned itself out pretty quickly. Anyway, so I expect to see in the next selection, next Pope, we'll see a lot of end of times prophecies being made. Look for it. The other one that I am just convinced is going to hit this year is the fundamentalist Mormon Church are on the verge of something big. You read about it in the news all the time. Keep your eyes open, because I honestly think that they're about to become a doomsday cult themselves.
Tell us why.
These people? Well, the leader of the movement has always been a David Koresh type figure. You know, they live... they are essentially a cult. I mean, they're a polygamist cult, but they're very charismatic, personality-driven. And what is it, the Jeffs family? The leader of this fundamentalist Mormon cult is old and has had health problems. And there's all this stuff about he has forbidden all his people to communicate with outsiders, and they're starting to stockpile weapons. And, there's all these rumors coming out of the compounds about this last stand kind of mentality. So it's a little scary to me, I think.
You mean Utah is about to secede from the Union?
Well, remember now that the Utah is dominated by the mainstream Mormon Church, and they're the biggest opponents of the fundamentalists, the FLDS. Right, and they've hounded them out, and so that's why when you hear about these compounds, like the one in Texas, it was because they couldn't safely live in Utah, because the mainstream church would come after them. The same thing, they're like in Arizona, New Mexico, and Texas, and I fully expect them to hole themselves up somewhere and just start taking pot shots at federal officers.
Now, this is the group, for those of you who are unfamiliar, this Warren Jeffs has unquestioned authority over a town dedicated to him, an entire town that he rules, and he has, I forget the number of wives that he has, but he constantly brings in new ones, and some of them are as young as 12, 13, 14 in that area, and that when he weds and simultaneously beds his new adolescent bride, it is with full witnesses of his other wives who he employs to hold the girl down in the ceremonial bed while they do audio recordings of the I don't know a polite way to put this. They're joining his cleaving into her, as it were, that sort of thing.
I mean, it's all well and good to sort of poke fun at the conventional Mormons, but these guys are nuts. This is one of those things where...
These are the guys the Mormons call nuts.
So
right,
I'm curious,
right, exactly.
what sort of manpower are we looking at for these Mormons? I mean, are we looking at hundreds, thousands?
Yeah, hundreds to
so
thousands.
we're looking
low thousands.
So we'd be looking at Waco on steroids, yeah?
Yes, definitely.
Yeah, but with an entire community, not just a building. It would be an entire city of...
Yeah, and this guy doesn't just have an old Camaro. I mean, he has a police department of his own that he runs.
Right.
But isn't he in prison already? I thought that was they got him in prison a year or two ago.
I haven't kept up with it well.
Yeah. Warren Jeffs is already in prison.
There's another one though that's actually running it.
Yeah.
Let's see if That's right. I need to read up on it a little bit more.
Yeah, and somebody else mentioned in here that we could have a female pope. That would be neat. If you're looking for a great villainous, I don't know. What do we think of the name Cruella de Pope?
What if they do get someone in there who is a progressive? I mean, what if they get someone in, and I think the biggest thing that they could possibly do is renounce the opposition to birth control and just embrace that. That would have a huge effect in Africa.
Yeah, but they can't. This would cause a schism in the church. Yeah, there is a rate of change that any of these organizations can stomach. And to a degree, the Anglican Church found this out, because the Anglicans also have, all the people in England, but they also have a load of people in the ex-Commonwealth countries. And they come to this sort of thing, can we ordain women as ministers? And in England, it's like, whatever. But if the Church of England does this, this causes great problems throughout Africa, where they won't stomach that sort of thing. And I think the same thing goes with the Catholic Church, that they simply can't they can't do these sorts of reversals without essentially causing a schism in the church. Having said that, the current Pope, I think it was the current Pope, did just sort of abolish the concept of purgatory.
Yes, he did. Arbitrarily pulled out of his butt that everything that the other 100 or so infallible popes have been arguing for the last several centuries was completely wrong. There's no such place. I've decided there's no purgatory, and all of the other infallible popes were wrong about that. Oh, and by the way, here are 7 more deadly sins the Bible forgot to mention.
Really?
I'm sorry, that sounds like a book, doesn't it? It sounds like one of those infomercial books they sell late at night.
What were the 7?
Wait, there's more.
What were the 7 that they left out?
Look, I memorized the first 7. I didn't memorize the second 7 because that was just a pope pulling them all out of his ass.
Thou shalt not prevent a pope from becoming pope simply because he served in the Hitler Youth.
I think it was jaywalking, duck face pictures, and schmoo. And no one wants to know what schmoo is, so we're just not going to ask.
An interesting question from the chat. Somebody addressed this one. Does he become non-infallible once he resigns next Thursday?
Well, obviously. Right? Because someone else becomes fallible at the same time he becomes...
No, there's a period where no one's fallible.
Or infallible.
Yeah. Well, until they elect a new one, there was this brief moment where there was no Sorry, I've got confused. I'm confusing myself. Can I just ask, is my audio better? Am I still echoing?
Yes, your audio is better. My video appears to be out, but it seems it's okay because Thunderfoot said something right at the moment that I was drinking a beer that caused me to laugh uncontrollably, and I'm so glad the camera did not get that.
You don't think the camera stopping functioning at the same time was sort of a mere coincidence then?
Yeah. Yeah, it was an ungraceful moment. Thank you very much, Thunder.
No problem. Yeah, I mean, I still don't get how they can have the Pope, who was supposedly appointed by God, resign without saying that God's actually making a mistake.
Well, that's because the Lord moves in delirious ways.
That's a good one. I like that. Delirious ways.
Okay. My wife wants to say something now. Say something.
Okay, it's worse than that. The Pope is going to have to stay on the Vatican grounds because once he stops being Pope, he no longer has diplomatic immunity, and he might get prosecuted for covering up the child sex scandals in the Vatican by the Catholic Church.
Yep. She didn't have her headphones in yet when we mentioned that before.
Oh, okay.
I'm just curious, are there any children in the Vatican?
Not that are legitimately there.
No, yeah. There are altar boys. I mean, I've been to the Vatican.
Really?
You see them walking around. Yeah, totally. Otherwise, the priest would get lonely.
I was about to say.
Oh, that was a cheap shot. I'm
not as cheap as the one I was aiming for, which is, do the choir boys walk kind of funny in the Vatican?
Well, there's a subtle difference between the word choir boy and concubine.
Let's move on.
Yes, moving on.
Well, Thunder, should we take this opportunity to talk about your video contest? I'm trying to remain as quiet as possible because my audio has an echo, so I'll interfere as little as possible. But tell us about your video competition.
Yes, so Eugenie Scott is organising the first slice of it. One of the judges that she's got on is Professor Sir Harry Kroto, who is actually a Nobel laureate, won his Nobel Prize in Chemistry in the late 1990s for the joint discovery of a new form of carbon, an allotrope of carbon called fullerenes, which have since become a very wide family of molecules. But yeah, he's also, he's very pro-science, and I'm very glad that Jeannie managed to get him on board. But there has been a depressingly small response to this video contest so far, to the point where I've only got 2 entries. That is, if you were to put in an entry at this point, you would be guaranteed to win. Now, I don't know whether that's going to change or not over the coming month or so. The deadline is the beginning of April. So if you want to enter, all you got to do is make 2 videos of 5 minutes or less, upload them to YouTube about how great science is.
Somebody in the chat did actually just ask, what is the topic for these videos? Do you want to expand on that?
The topic is basically how great science has been for mankind. All the wonderful things that it has allowed us to see. That I mean, if you think about it, just of all the humans who have ever lived, what fraction of them even had the slightest inkling that we were living on a spinning sphere going around a nuclear reactor? Just things like that. It's really changed our perspective of the universe. So yeah, you make a couple of videos like that, 5 minutes or less, and all you got to do is impress the judges. That's basically all the rules. Make good videos, win the prizes.
And do you want to tell people where they can find out more information? I think you've got it on your blog site, amongst other things.
Yeah, so I've got it on my blog. That's thunderfoot.org. I've also now got 3 videos up on the subject. Each one has the very simple rules in the description below. So yeah, I mean, the whole thing was geared up to try and encourage more people to make pro-science videos on YouTube. So here's hoping that by the end of this year we'll have some more juicily awesome videos about science on YouTube.
We had some incident in Bangladesh that you wanted to discuss, Aaron.
Oh yes, there's been in the news just recently. There are atheist bloggers in Bangladesh who, following what is going on in America, however, they are not in the comfortable environment that we are. At least one of them has been killed, brutally attacked, and beaten to death so far. And the crowds in Bangladesh are holding up signs, calling for the deaths and horrible treatment of any atheist bloggers. And they have 4 primary targets. One, as I said, has just been killed. I'm not sure about the fate of the other ones. And that's really all I know. I mean, I'm sorry that I didn't pick up any more than that, but I did just catch that before I came on.
DPR, I got something if we can.
Yeah. Let's have a free fall. Go for it.
Dev Shell's annual, was it Madness, Mayhem, and Charity event is coming up. That's still quite a ways out. It's April 6th and 7th. And there are going to be some 36-hour blogathon benefit for HIV research. I don't know quite if I signed up for it or not, but if I did, I'm going to try to use my slot. There is a local physics symposium coming to town here. The local university, Texas A&M, are going to have 4 Nobel Prize winners lecturing, and then they're going to have a lot of hands-on demo type stuff. So I'm going to take my camera, my video phone basically, and broadcast from there to take you through some of the demos that they do. So that should be interesting if I get it all signed up and worked out. And I'll have my kids with me, so you'll be able to experience physics through the eyes of an 8-year-old.
8-year-old. Now you've got my interest.
Yeah. Yeah. DPR Jones for Pope. He's got the right qualifications.
But does he look good when he is in his underwater fortress, stroking his pussy, saying, "I expect you to die, Mr. Bond"?
I think we're confusing our Bond villains.
Yeah, but come on, the next Pope has to have... Right, they're going to have to lose the Vatican and turn it into an underwater base. This is the only way they're going to trump Ratzinger.
Or dormant volcano. I think that's always been my favorite.
Oh, definitely. Yeah, move the Vatican to Vesuvius.
Yeah, I've got a Google alert in case one comes up for sale, because I really have been working on my evil science lair. It's important.
Yeah, and I got another question about the whole Pope thing. I mean, when you do the replacement Pope, ideally for the Catholic Church, they're not going to want to get somebody who is an atheist wet dream to make Catholicism look bad. They're going to try to get somebody who will improve the population, because Catholicism is in decline, much like anything else. Right?
So who is your now prime choice for the Pope?
No, it's not a who so much. It's whoever you get to be the next Pope. What the hell could he possibly do that could improve?
Come on, there is an obvious choice for the next Pope. It's either going to be Mel Gibson or Tom Cruise. I mean, this is they need to up their game, you know.
But seriously,
well, this is an interesting point. Someone said an atheist pope, which would be quite fun. But two things. There was the only cardinal that we have in this country who's going off to the conclave to vote on the next pope. There were allegations that came out in the papers today accusing him of inappropriate behaviour with other priests going back some 30 years. There seems to be no end to this scandal.
Well, just out of interest, out of bad behaviour for a priest in the behaviour of other priests, what is that? Singing out of tune, or are we talking something a little more lurid?
I'm sure we're talking more lurid, as we'll find out in due course. Now, this is another question I wanted to raise, if I may, see where we get with this. I presume that all of you have seen Dark Matter 2525's latest video, which is called God's God. If you haven't, I'd strongly recommend it. But it's actually interesting because someone had posted something somewhere or raised something during the course of the last show. I can't quite remember, but his question was, is God an atheist? And it kind of sort of like fits in with Dark Matter's video. Do you think God is actually the ultimate atheist?
Well, no. I mean, if you know that you're a god, then you do believe in a god because you're it. The problem is that you do run into the somewhat paradox that comes up in Dark Matter's video that I can say that I'm God, anyone can say that they're God, and that they know everything, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they are a god or that they know everything.
But our God, the God that we're talking about, doesn't know everything, because you got to remember, he has to ask other people. I mean, he had to ask Satan what was going on in the world and have Satan report to him. He had to ask Adam and Eve
where are they? Yeah.
Yeah, where so, this guy doesn't know everything.
Cain and Abel, he didn't know where.
Where's your brother? Yeah.
Yeah.
He laid bets. I mean, can you imagine Satan and God having a bet about something that happened in the future? How can an omnipotent person have a bet going?
Well, now that's very simple. He made Satan to be an idiot.
Well, you notice he didn't bet on sparrows falling. So that part he sees. He sees every sparrow fall, but maybe not anything else.
This is the crazy thing. If you're omnipotent, right, there is fun for the guy who doesn't know everything, right? Satan, who doesn't know everything, can actually get some thrills out of life because he doesn't know what the outcome will be. For God, it's just a completely a complete mood killer. He knows what the outcome is going to be. There is no point in God doing anything.
And of course, there's no point in us doing anything either, because he knows in advance whether or not we're going to pray and what we would pray for and why we would pray and how to avoid making us pray and how we would answer to our prayers, whether we prayed or not, and what the ultimate goal is going to be, whether we prayed or not. So it really doesn't matter. It's all manifest destiny, and we're done.
Yeah, must be dull being God.
Well, another thing that, again, someone in the chat posted is in relation to his omnipotence. He couldn't defeat iron chariots. God knows what he'd do with a nuke.
That's true. Yeah, that's true. Yeah, I would imagine a tank would qualify as an iron chariot, wouldn't you?
Did you actually, just on the energy scales here, I did one of the Why Do People Laugh at Creationist series where God stops the sun in the sky. And you can do some ballpark calculations, and it's the most ineffective use of military force ever, because to stop the Earth from spinning requires, the equivalent of millions of tons of nukes for every person alive, when you can kill people quite easily just by rupturing a single vein or artery.
Well, we've noticed that
God stops the sun in the sky such that his army can go and brutally slaughter all of these people with swords. I mean, that's just messed up. I mean,
well, there's a direct inverse relationship to what you can verify versus God's infinite power. If you can't verify any of it at all, then God is incredibly powerful and is likely to do all kinds of incredible things. But the more that you can verify of the story, the less of the story can be verifiable. So there's an inverse relationship there.
I'd like to talk about something going on in Oklahoma. I don't know if you guys are familiar with this, but
does anything go on in Oklahoma?
Bill?
Yes, the HB 1674.
I've been in contact with the state director for Oklahoma for the American Atheists. Gave him my sympathies. If it was going on in my state, I know what I would do, but I have resources he does not. I don't know what the hell he would do in Oklahoma faced with this, but I'm really glad it didn't happen in my state, because this is a big damn deal.
I mean, Oklahoma's a messed up place, and we consider it sort of Texas's hat, but it's a place where
that's harsh, dude.
It's only very recently become illegal to do cockfighting, or actually, I think dog fighting was legal there only 10 years ago. So it's kind of a backwards place, but it's also a major meth lab, and their law enforcement is crippled by having all these meth labs popping up everywhere. But their educational status is so far down the line. They don't need this kind of crap. They don't need, let's see if I can get this right.
Well, you need to clarify what it is that we're talking about. What I got out of that was that it is a bill that enables children to write on their science papers that the earth is 6,000 years old, or whatever their religious belief is, that they can put down their religious belief as science fact, and that it must be graded with an A because there's no way to prove them wrong. That has been made the law in the state of Oklahoma. Education has just had its testicles lopped right off and been forced to submit to people's religious beliefs being erroneously stated as fact in the classroom for an A grade.
And again, it's not just creationism here, and this is sort of a suite of issues that have begun to travel together. I'm going to read just a short bit here. Some teachers may be unsure of the expectations concerning how they should present information on some subjects, such as, but not limited to, biological evolution, the chemical origins of life, global warming, and human cloning. Isn't that funny that human cloning has gotten lumped in with all these other ones because it's a religious hot button issue?
Mm-hmm.
And they're using this critical thinking idea, the idea that students ought to be allowed to critically think about, scientifically accepted concepts like biological evolution and global warming. And that does, it sounds so reasonable. Like, yeah, critical thinking. I want my kids to learn critical thinking.
Yeah, but of course,
Yeah,
what
yeah.
it means
We
is,
want them to learn critical thinking, but we don't want them. Well, they aren't capable of. Well, come on. If they're not even capable of sort of reading, writing, and simple science, the idea that they're capable of appraising the vast body of knowledge and coming to sensible solutions is just bollocks. The reason that we have all these sort of specialists who spend their lives poring over this data is so, well, first of all, so everyone else doesn't have to, because not everyone else has the time. But also, you're not going to get that out of some school kid.
right. And of course, when they say critical thinking, what they mean is deny what the facts are and deny what the level of our current understanding according to the best educated expert specialists.
Let me ask you another question. So if I were to if there's a child in this education system and he says that no, I've appraised the data and I decide that Newtonian motion is wrong and Aristotelian motion is correct, then he can get an A grade just as well?
Well,
Yes.
I think that's a good point, actually, Thunder. It very specifically talks about controversial subjects, and they're not controversial in science. There's nothing controversial about biological evolution in science. It's controversial outside of science, and I guess that's what really bothers me about this. Is it's as though we ought to allow students special dispensation to deal with issues that they find troubling, right? Even though the strength of the evidence or the controversy within science is non-existent, so long as there's some political motive behind doubting things, we should give it some sort of special provision. And that's really what this says.
Right. So taking another religious one, pi is 3.
Right?
Yeah, there's this bit in the Bible where pi is exactly 3.
So
Now it's
it would be
geometrically
possible.
Well, you
That's
have to
just-
say,
well-
Thunder, even though it was somewhat inaccurate, it was probably one of the more accurate statements that appears in the Bible. It was only off by a few
At least
percentage.
scientifically, yeah.
Yeah,
Can I raise
but
something? Because
That's
I had a...
what hurts.
but it's still geometrically impossible in Euclidean space. I mean,
Well,
if I do my calculations on the basis that pi is 3, does my maths paper get marked down?
No, because if it's religious, then the answer is acceptable. And if you worship Cthulhu, you can turn to non-Euclidean geometry.
Actually, that's an interesting one. So, as long as my answer is religiously based, does it automatically get an A? So
No one
can
can
you
prove it
actually
wrong, right?
You call on Cthulhu, and he tells you that there aren't actually all those chemical elements. There's only 4: wind, water, fire, and music. And do I get an A grade now?
I guess what bothers me the most about these kinds of situations is not, I actually do think that it's a good practice for an advanced student to be able to critique the evidence. I think, in the proper context, that actually could be a good thing. The problem for me is the selectivity of the topics that they think should be critiqued. They're not critiquing the atomic theory. They're not critiquing the cell theory. They're only critiquing the ones that they find contentious. If it were uniformly applied, if that were how the class were structured, let's take a look at, why people didn't believe the cell theory prior to, Leeuwenhoek, and why did people believe in it after Leeuwenhoek? What was convincing about the evidence? What was wrong with the model beforehand? What were the anomalies? If that's how you structured the class, so that every theory were approached with that same general idea, the problem is singling out these topics, these particular issues. It says to the student, you have permission not to believe these because they don't conform with your politics.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I've got no problem whatsoever with, giving students sort of simple problems where the answers are actually known, but the student might not know them, and letting them test their problem-solving skills on essentially rudimentary problems, because it is a useful skill. It's a useful life skill. But the idea that people with, look, even after a university education, a PhD and the such like, you're only really just about at the point where you can actually assess unknown problems and have a reasonable chance of getting it right. So the idea that you're going to get this out of school kids is hopelessly optimistic. But
you might appreciate this, Thunder. I was interviewed today by a podcast based out of Dubai, and they were asking me about my confidence in the evolution theory, and that, don't I believe that is it become a dogmatism that I can't question? And because there are some gaps in it, and there are some things we don't know. We don't know everything. And I said, yes, exactly, because you look at chemistry, look at atomic theory. It's the same thing as evolution theory, because we're still teaching the Bohr's model of the atom. We know it's incorrect on certain levels. We know that there are gaps in our understanding. This doesn't challenge whether atoms exist. We still use that model because it works mathematically for our equations. But there are obviously holes in that theory too. Does that mean that we should question atomic theory in the sense that they're delivering this?
Another interesting one, I mean, if you ever want to throw the spanner in the works for these folks, is ask them whether they actually believe in atoms, because no one has ever seen an atom. In fact, no one, well, it's more than that. It is physically impossible to see atoms, because your eyes are only sensitive to light down to, I don't know, 800 nanometers or something. And atoms
we have
are at a point.
Atoms.
You're right, but that's not seeing them. That's your eyes are only sensitive up to about 800 nanometers or something.
And we really haven't photographed atoms, right? I mean, we've basically shot high energy photons at them, and we get these bounce back structures. But it's a very different thing from sort of the light shines on the object and they capture the light chemically. It's a different type of thing. The same thing is true of viruses. Like one of the things that comes up with AIDS denialists, HIV AIDS denialists, is they say, no, they've never really purified HIV. Well, that's in some sense true. You can't exactly purify the virus without destroying it.
It's a dynamic system as well,
Right.
If it's constantly changing from whatever, I forget what the life cycle of these things is, but they're produced in cells. They then go out, and there's the capsids. Can you not sort of partially refine the capsids, or they just sort of rot away?
You're mixing up viruses. Capsids usually imply bacteriophage, the bacterial viruses, but the envelope, I think, is what you're talking about here. Or
there we go.
Glycoproteins.
You don't have to drift far out
Envelope.
before you're talking nonsense. So the envelopes, the envelopes, you can presumably isolate the envelopes. Yeah.
Oh, sure. Yeah. The protein, but it's very hard to know that you have it without tearing it apart and running it on a gel, right? To separate it out.
Yeah.
But I can develop antibodies against an envelope protein and see where it's at in the solution or on a gel or virtually 100 other ways. I can indirectly detect each of the components and verify that those components aren't present in, say, a cell line which is virus-free. So there's all this indirect evidence all pointing back to one central place. But if you're going to constantly move that goal line, if you're going to keep pushing it back until you're like, until I am shrunk down to the size of the virus and I can go around and touch it and stick my finger in the holes, I'm not going to believe it, then of course you're never going to reach that level. And that's how this denialist mindset works.
It's interesting you should say that, because I had an argument with, it wasn't Nephilim Free, but it was someone like Nephilim Free, about it was evolution and how single site mutations in RNA can give you different proteins. And he was obviously, it was only when I actually asked him the question, do you actually know what an enzyme is? Or do you know what a protein is? And he didn't have a clue. Right? He was just regurgitating. These were just sort of ways of deflecting the argument. He didn't know what any of these terms meant. But he found out that most people didn't know what any of these terms meant. So all he had to do was throw them out, and people would assume he knew what he was talking about.
Mm-hmm. That was my experience with Nephilim. Was it just so obvious he didn't even know the terms he was using? That, like, how can you argue with someone, let's say over cars, who say, "Nuh-uh, I was sitting on a carburetor and I pushed the brake pedal and it made my car go really fast straight up." I mean, it's nonsense. I can't argue with someone spouting nonsense. They don't even understand the terms they're using.
The individual words they use are real words, like carburetor, seat wheel, whatever. It's just they don't know what they mean.
I challenged Nephilim Free to describe to me the concept of emergence. And he seemed to be flipping back and forth between whether emergence meant the same thing as evolution or whether emergence meant abiogenesis. And he spoke very confidently about the formation of the cells being emergence, as though he were talking about abiogenesis. And I couldn't interject that it is a different subject he absolutely knows nothing about. And that if it were possible for him to know shame or dishonor, then he would be embarrassing himself.
Well, he doesn't, and this is the account of stupidity that I experienced. When was it? Sunday or Monday last week, in which someone that you're certainly familiar with, Aaron, Jason Burns, held a blog TV show in which his special guest was Nephilim Free. And for 90 minutes, Jason nodded away everything Nephi was saying, everything that we've heard Nephi say before, quite clearly not understanding a word of it. And I only watched it because I had been promised that I would be allowed to call in once they started taking questions, which I did. And because so many issues had been discussed and Jason had been, as I say, nodding like one of those dogs in the back of a car, oh yeah, I believe, oh, this is wonderful, you're so brilliant, Nephi. I thought the one way of getting across how delusional Nephi is was to ask Jason Burns whether he agreed that geocentrism was a pretty wacky idea. And my intention was, once he said yes, to then say, well, the person you've just been listening to for the last 90 minutes is a geocentrist. But I got an answer I was not prepared for. Jason Burns said, oh, I don't know, because I'm not very good at physics. I don't know whether sun goes around Earth or Earth goes around sun. And he went on, and I get this, he went on to say, as I said, I'm not good at physics. I only found out about the Higgs boson last week. And I thought, Jason, if you don't know whether the Earth rotates around or orbits the sun or the other way around, then I don't think you need to be looking at the Higgs boson just yet. But then I was cut off. I wasn't allowed the supplementary question, but they came back about 20 minutes later for another question, and they had been talking about the Ark. So I invited Nephilim, who had, as one could predict, mentioned the fact that Noah only had to take certain kinds, not species. So I specifically asked Nephi to define a kind, define a species, and explain in what way they are different. And for some reason, I'm sure purely accidental and coincidental, I was cut off from the call at that point, and he never answered the question. So there we go. But we have, let me just, a few things I would have said before, but I had echo then, but I don't know. Firstly, if you want to join the show, send a Skype contact request. You can raise anything that we've been discussing or whatever topic you like. Alternatively, you can send a question through Blog TV. Just click on Magic Sandwich Show and send me a question. Someone has just sent me one, so I'm going to come on to that next. But also to remind people that not only are these programs now posted on YouTube, but we have finally got around to getting them successfully onto iTunes. Not everyone likes iTunes, but we also have I think it's a feed burner link as well. Both of those links you can find from our webpage, which I will put in the title.
Who do we have to
of the
thank
talk.
for the
The rationalizer helped me
Yeah.
in relation to both. I'm very grateful, and he's given me an idiot's sort of like instruction guide, so hopefully I'll be able to do it from now on. And those normally appear within 48 hours of the show, so Monday or Tuesday they should be available, as I say, from our website, and I'll put that address above the chat in a moment. But the first question that's been sent to me, they say if anyone doesn't want to come on Skype, just send a question. This person says that they are a Catholic and would like to raise this issue. Why is there so much hate between Christians and atheists? And goes on to say, the reason I ask is because I am a Catholic and I respect people's faith. I am sick and tired of the fighting. Who would like to pick up on that first?
Do you really respect people's faith? You would respect the people in sub-Saharan Africa who are burning witches as a matter of faith, killing children as a matter of faith, so suggesting that wearing condoms in the middle of an AIDS epidemic is actually a bad thing? I mean,
I don't think you need to go as far as Africa, do you? I mean, in America and in Europe, in certain places.
Yeah, I mean, what
suppression of women's
about?
rights, suppression of rights of homosexualities, discrimination, bigotry, hatred, all on people's
education.
faiths.
I mean, education is the big bugbear of mine. Like what we were talking about earlier with Oklahoma, that if you're a first world civilization, you need an educated population. And the very idea that you're going around saying that people can basically write whatever they want on their paper as a matter of faith and have this and not be penalized for it is basically an argument for an uneducated populace.
Yeah, well, we also spoke
intellectual
a little bit earlier.
suicide.
We spoke earlier about the fundamentalists of Latter-day Saints group that's in Texas, the offshoot from the Mormons. Well, this guy's a Catholic, and he says that he respects other faiths. But does he respect that one? Does he respect the Protestants who are anti-Catholic and say that Catholics are not true Christians? In which case, Christianity is no longer the dominant religion on earth, but Islam already is, and Christianity would be ranked somewhere beneath Hinduism in that scale.
Or the Jim Joneses of the world, do you respect them?
Or
do you
the
respect
Taliban.
their faith?
The
Yeah.
Taliban who shoot 14-year-old girls in the head on their religious faith beliefs.
And what is
If I can
faith again?
summarize, if I can
Concordance.
summarize all of this, though, no one cares what's going on in your head. That I think is universally true. You know, if you believe Jesus appeared to you as a unicorn, who cares? Who really cares? What matters is how you act as a result, or what effect your beliefs have, particularly when they affect the people around you, right? And how, for example, this country is going, or who you hate and how you act on that hate, who you judge and how you act on that judgment. That's the part I think that most of us are concerned about is not what's going on inside your head. It's what's going on outside of your head, the actions you take as a result. I am fine with whatever people want to believe. And if they kept them entirely to themselves, their beliefs, I would never have reason to talk about it.
Yeah, and another
Seconded.
important thing to bring up is when you're talking about scientists, or when scientists are talking, we will readily argue with each other about practically anything, and there's a great many things that we don't agree on, clearly. But we don't use the word hate. That just doesn't come up in scientific circles, whereas every religion does.
I mean, I don't know whether I won't name you. You might not want to be named, but I do think that is at the heart of the issue. It's Hitchens who often used to quote, I think it was Jefferson, saying, "I care not what my neighbour thinks, whether he believes in 15 gods or none. In doing so, it neither breaks my leg or picks my pocket. But why won't they keep this to themselves?" And this is something perhaps we can have a quick discussion about. Why won't religious people keep their views to themselves? Why do they seek to impose it? And it's that imposition of their views, which are purely faith-based, i.e. there is no evidence to support them. Why should we respect them for holding beliefs which have a very serious impact on other people? this is not something to be respected. It is to be ridiculed and called out for what it is: bigotry, discrimination, and hatred. I just don't understand how someone cannot see that. And I suspect that if you actually examine the position yourself with sufficient clarity, you would see that our points are, I think, unarguable.
Yeah, I got one last thing to say to our Catholic who says that he respects other faith. The problem is if you don't have the...
To be honest, it's actually a she. But...
Okay. If you don't have the right faith, then your God of infinite love will torture that person forever, without mercy, without recourse, pointlessly, without end. So where your judgment may be fine and dandy, that you won't hold it against me that I don't believe exactly what you do, or that somebody else believes in a completely different wacky religion to yours. Your religion holds that any deviation, anybody who believes differently than you do, should be and deserves to be tortured mercilessly forever by your loving God.
I mean, again, just if I may pick up on that, Aaron, this is something I sort of like jotted down during the earlier conversation, the concept of free will. And I never fully understand what the religious are going on about free will. But the one point I would make is this: it doesn't seem to be particularly free if the consequences of exercising that free will are not in concordance with the God's desires. Yeah, you've got free will, but unless you think like I want you to think, I'm going to burn you in hell forever. That's free will?
Now, this is the Dirty Harry form of free will of, do I feel lucky, punk? You've got free choice, but I'm going to shoot you if you choose the wrong thing.
Yeah, kiss my feet and I'll give you $1 million. Don't kiss my feet and I'll shoot you in the head. Is that a free choice?
Well, yeah.
Well, I mean, in a way, it is free. You are free to make either choice, but on another level, it quite clearly is not. I don't know.
On another level, it's extortion, isn't it?
I think there's a certain element of duress involved in the situation.
Okay, so we finally get an opportunity to talk to Dani, do we?
Unfortunately, I did message Dani, and for those that may not understand what we're talking about, Dani came on, not the last show, the show before. She was, until fairly recently, an atheist, but had converted recently to Christianity, and said that she had evidence to present that was persuasive. It was persuasive on her, made her change. She didn't have time to explain on that show, but said that she would hopefully come back on a future show. I messaged her before the last show. She couldn't make it then. I messaged her an hour or so ago, and she said that she was unable to make it onto this show, even though she was actually online on Skype. So it looks as if we're not going to hear today what Dani's evidence is.
That's unfortunate. I was on a podcast of Dogma Debate a couple weeks ago with guest star Sam Singleton, and we were talking with the regular crew of that show, the Barking Atheist and Shayra, and both of them knew Dani H.C., considered her a friend, part of the same community as they, and they were shocked, mouths hanging open, when I told them that she was now declaring herself to be a Christian. It was as if somebody had been turned into a zombie, and it was somebody that you cared about. Very much like that, I think. And so Shayra and the Barking Atheists were nothing short of alarmed at that kind of news.
Well, I have to say, and I don't mean this in an overly insulting way to her, but when she was explaining her position on the show, I did for a moment think that she was trolling and being disingenuous, because her arguments were so lacking in any substance. But hey, I mean, this goes back to the old problem. It's very difficult to tell the religious from the trolls because of one of them is that reason. But it opens up another potential topic of conversation. Let's go back to the Jason Burns and the Nephilim Freeze, or in fact any theist. What is the best way of seeking to get our argument across to them? Because time and time again it does appear as if you are just hitting a wall and nothing is getting through.
Yeah, I got asked this very question in Houston last week, and the answer that I gave was that these people are in a game of pretend. That's really what it is. It's assumed conclusion, and you're reinforcing through confirmation bias. Dani H.C. told us that at one point that what did it for her was that they always told her, if you don't believe in God, pray to him with your whole heart. That's the thing. Once you convince yourself that it's there and begin talking to it, assuming the conclusion, you're going to reinforce that delusion through confirmation bias. And then because it is a self-fulfilling game of pretend, you have to defend that position in a way that we would not. We rational people, if we're given evidence that something we enjoy believing in, for lack of a better term, I like some of the old urban legends that used to be out there. I used to think these were quite fun stories to tell, and then I found out that some of them were not true, and I was very disappointed. But I found out they were not true, and I stopped retelling them as though they were true. If I were a religious person, then I would find whatever means possible to continue repeating the same story, to find some excuse for how that story might still be true, or if there's no way at all that I could do that, then when you start telling me the truth of the story that I want to believe in, I would do as the religious do and put my fingers in my ears. And I have seen people literally do that, really seriously put their fingers in their ears and shake their heads and close their eyes and yell, la, 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 to prevent themselves from hearing the explanation that I'm giving. And there is not a rational person on earth that would do that in defense of their belief in evolution or geosphericity or what have you.
Well, can I just pause you very briefly there, Aaron? I don't want to pressure her if she's not comfortable to do so, but I didn't note that Dani has actually just entered the room. So Dani, if you're listening and you would like to come back, would like to talk to you, we will of course be treated with respect and courtesy. I will assure you of that. But would be very. That
means Thunder and I will leave the room.
Well, I might have to cut you off.
Wait, you didn't include me? I'm nice.
No, concordance is too nice.
It's an irony, isn't it? The one with the big teeth is the nice guy.
Yeah. You know what makes me wonder about these creationist bills is why they why are they threatened by a scientific education? Why are they so insistent that their children not be taught something in the classroom, given that they're coming home, they have so much influence over them? We talked once about the idea of a marketplace of ideas. To me, this is the classic example. Is you need this sort of protectionism. You need to protect your children from ideas which are very persuasive, have a lot of strength, and so you're very careful to shelter your children or shelter yourself from hearing these arguments. And I think that whenever you find yourself in a position where you do your best to silence your opponent in any way, for any reason, it shows you're probably not on the right side. You're probably not
bullseye
doing it the right way, right? If you have so little faith in your own position that you feel the need not to expose yourself to a critical argument or an opposing viewpoint, that's always, to me, a red flag.
Yeah, well, again, this came up in my interview from the people in Dubai today when they were talking about my arguments against God and all that, and how do I prove that there is no God, which they think I have to do in order to be an atheist. And I said, well, I think it's a little bit hypocritical that when I talk to Christians, they have absolutely no problem discarding leprechauns as being just ipso facto there are no leprechauns. They can say that even though they can't prove it, simply because there's no evidence of leprechauns. And the guy stopped me there and he said, but there's a difference. There's a difference in that 5 billion people believe in God and very few people believe in leprechauns. And that's the point of what they're talking about, why they have to control education. That's why they have to destroy standardized education and let the religion rule the education process. Because if you're the only one who believes in leprechauns, then nobody takes you seriously and your leprechauns don't exist. We can just declare that they don't. But if 5 billion people have been convinced that those leprechauns exist, that makes them real. Because in their perspective, reality is a democracy, and reality can change, remember, if you believe hard enough. But in order to do that, you have to have other people sharing the same delusion that you do to reinforce and reaffirm what you believe.
I mean, I would counter that with the obvious thing that 5 billion people do not believe in the same God. They believe in many different gods. In fact, you would probably struggle to find a few thousand people who, if asked to write a description of their God, would actually find someone else who actually writes down exactly the same thing. So at the simplest level, you've got Muslims, Christians, and Jews. They all believe different things. Hindus, and so forth. And each within even these factions, there are many, many splinters, and they are all incompatible with their cousin religions. So
yes.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, they believe in something supernatural. They all that they share. But then again, in that category, you would also put belief in unicorns. That if you actually now just put the categories as those who believe in something supernatural and those who don't, that tells you almost as much as those who believe in gods and those who don't.
Aaron, you asked a question in the chat. I'm not entirely sure whether this question makes sense, but it was basically, how do you explain the billions that believe in Santa Claus?
I'd like to ask my version of the question back to you again, Thunder. Do you think the goal of these creationist education bills are proselytizing to a new audience, or is it a matter of defending their believers, defending their children from other beliefs?
I would say it's a combination of two factors. First of all, they probably genuinely believe this, and they don't want their children to endure the punishment of their religion by having that faith challenged. So basically, it's excluding all other arguments from the arena and therefore making it a safe space, if you like, for their children to learn in. You know, you exclude everything that can test their religion. The second is that these people have actually invested. When you actually become a member of a religion, you invest a lot in it. It's a gamble. And eventually it does come that you've invested so much of your life in this that it's you just can't accept it being wrong. The most obvious example of this is Scientology, where people genuinely put money into it. And once you put a few $100,000 of money into your Scientology, it makes accepting that all of that money that you put in is just wasted a bigger barrier to cross. So I think with a lot of these religions, they've invested so much of their time that it's they can't afford to be wrong. And yeah, that's it.
Well,
Yeah,
can I just give you an update?
reading.
Before we move on, I'll just give you an update. Although Dani doesn't appear to want to appear on the show, she's quite happy to post comments in the chat, which include our last four comments being, believing in God is amazing. I believe I can fly. I believe I can touch the sky. And what if God created the world to make God created the world to look old? Please.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was about to say.
I mean, are you one? I think Dani's winding us up. Ha 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 ha.
Yep. That's what my wife just said. She says she's trolling, that this can't possibly be sincere.
Well, I would agree with.
In which case, good one, Dani.
One of the other things that they're fighting very hard for, or they were fighting very hard for, was changing history in the history books.
Yeah, I noticed that as well. I think a lot of it is about engineering the safe space for their children, where they are not going to have their beliefs challenged.
Yeah, this
Think
is the
about
thing. When
confidence that must demonstrate. You're worried that your kids, if they learn too much about Thomas Jefferson, will become what? Democrats? What's the concern? I mean, honestly, what is the danger of that kind of factual information to the belief system they must have?
This is where I think you and I really agree that good ideas stand on their merits, and open forums are the best way of weeding out the wheat from the chaff, and safe spaces, as it were, where arguments can't be challenged, this is the breeding ground of dogma, and it's not very useful for weeding out good ideas from bad ones.
And what you said about changing history and all like that, I just want to add something. What is the argument that most people bring up against atheists, when they want to challenge us on something? When they tell us that we don't believe because we don't want to believe, we deny God's existence because we don't want to be accountable for our actions. But what we see in them is that it does not matter what evil they do, they will be forgiven of it by their God. So they're not accountable for anything. God, please forgive me. Okay, good. God told me secretly in my head that I am forgiven for every evil thing I ever do, right? And then they want to deny the science, or they want to deny global warming. Again, they're not responsible. If they want to drill for oil in the Arctic Ocean where they've already achieved global warming to the point that they can get to the Arctic Ocean, and now they want to aggravate the problem, they can deny their responsibility, one, by denying that global warming exists, and then also by denying that it would matter if it did exist, because these are the end times, and it doesn't matter what the hell we do, how many babies we have, what the hell we do to the environment, burn down every last tree, it doesn't matter. We are not accountable. There's not going to be anything after this. These are the last times. I don't have to look out for the generation that comes after me. There is no accountability on their perspective whatsoever. All of the accountability and all of the responsibility, unfortunately, is on our side.
I've often wondered about the lack of responsibility, and I don't know, I kind of like particularly Concordance's feedback on this one, that if you think about any hierarchical order in a group, you need a few leaders and a lot of followers. So you expect the demographics of the society to be a few leaders and a lot of followers. Well, isn't that a fairly good description of religion? But basically, most people are happy to follow. They want to follow.
Yeah, I'm
I
not
think
sure.
I think we may be joined by Dani. Are you with us, Dani?
You're trolling us, Dani.
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
We can hear you, Dani.
Okay.
What have you got for us?
Sorry, I'm not trolling. Seriously. I was
That's the first thing that a troll will always say.
No, I'm serious. I'm sorry. I just,
I'm totally serious too.
I'm serious. I'm not trolling. Like, what can I do to prove I'm not trolling? Like, seriously, I'm not. I never troll.
So, are you a Bible-believing Christian now?
Yes, I believe in the Bible, and I believe in God. That
And
doesn't
what's
mean
your
I
favorite passage in the Bible?
I
How
don't
about
know.
1 Peter 3:15?
Okay.
How many Gospels are there?
First of
which
all, I'm not gonna sit here and be like discussing about the Bible in bits, like just taking some parts of it and trying to. You can't do that. Like you need to take a whole worldview in consideration when you're talking about the Bible. And
so
having
just-
done that,
actually,
having
no,
done that and irrevocably become atheists, what else would you suggest? Because here's my problem, Dani. The Bible has been proven to be dead wrong about damn near everything from back to front. We know there was no global flood. We know the Bible is not the Word of God. We know that it was written by men adapted from earlier religions and that they used these to claim divine guidance to do inhuman things against their neighbors. They were justifying their own immorality. There is no morality to be found in the Bible. There is no factual accuracy to be found in the Bible. It is a complete crock of, can I say this word? Maybe if I say it European style, shite. So there's nothing to believe in there. It is beneath serious consideration. You had mentioned that these people had shown you compelling evidence, and you told me that you couldn't tell me what the evidence was then, but that the next time you came on the show, you would tell me what the evidence was that changed your mind. And understand that where we dropped this conversation off last time, I told you that if I had encountered something that caused me to change my mind, guaranteed, I would be able to give you the compelling evidence that would also change your mind. So
okay,
share
let's hear
with
from
me
Dani. What you
that
got,
is.
Dani?
okay. First of all, I don't think there is one thing that would change your mind, because, like I said, I had seen evidence, but it's not the kind of evidence that you show to people. Because
Okay, well then hold on. Let me clarify here. Evidence is a set of facts, and facts are objectively verifiable points of data. They are not disputed. They are demonstrable. They are measurable. So you're going to present to me objectively verifiable factual information that is positively indicative of, concordant with, or aligns with one available option over any other. That is what evidence is. So you present to me, you can't tell me that it's not evidence that you would show, because if it's not something you can show, then it's subjective and therefore isn't evidence. It needs to be objective in order to be factual. It needs to be factual in order to be evidence.
so it needs to be objective in order to matter to you.
In order to be verifiably accurate. And the only thing that matters, it doesn't matter what you believe. It only matters why you believe it. It has to be verifiably accurate to some degree. Now, to what degree can you show that your belief is accurate?
So basically, Dani, what do you believe?
Okay.
What was it that transformed you from
Well, let her
non-believer to
answer,
believer?
Thunder. I think she's got the question. Let her answer.
The thing is, I don't believe in the Bible only because of what is written in the Bible, but because of the reality that I perceive today. It's
Okay, let me clarify what you're saying. You don't believe in the Bible. Is that what you're saying?
I believe in the Bible, but it's
Okay,
not
so you
because,
believe in the Bible, but you don't believe what the Bible says.
No, I believe what the Bible says.
Okay, so you said you don't believe in the Bible because of what the Bible says, because, well, there's frankly no reason to believe in the Bible if you know what the Bible says. More people tell me that they become atheists because they read the Bible than for any other reason. I understand that. So what is this reality, which again would be a factual, measurable, demonstrable situation? What is this reality that was presented that you can now present to us? Because if you can't present it to us, it is not a reality at all.
Okay, the reality that I perceive is a world where people are capable of being mean and evil, but at the same time, they are capable of being really good and just
Okay, can I jump in here? You, well,
Okay.
okay. Please don't interrupt me while I'm interrupting her. Fine.
All right, even let me maybe I can bring something to this. So I mean,
Okay.
I know there are unicorns in the Bible. I knew there are whales in the Bible. I even know there are some dogs in the Bible. But are there any trolls in the Bible?
Okay.
Let me get back on track before my wife jumped in. I need to clarify this step by step.
Okay.
And she. Oh, never mind. Go ahead.
Look, I understand what you mean by evidence. What
Okay,
I'm
well,
trying
let me give you this.
explain is
Mhm.
that
Hang on,
the evidence is
Thunder,
not.
one moment, Thunder.
I'm not trying to give you evidence in that sense. So if that is all you care about, then really I can't add anything to this conversation.
Do you know some definition of evidence that I have never heard of?
Actually, no. Let's just go for a bit of a narrative here, Danny. Describe it to us the day when you first found God and how it happened.
Okay. Well, it wasn't a day. It was many days where this this made me change my mind. Okay.
Okay, let me go back to this, please. Just let me clarify one thing. You said there are some people who are nice, there are some people who are mean, and if you look at the Bible and all the people who absolutely believed the Bible, the people that are in the Bible stories, all absolutely believed the Bible, and they were being complete, horrible, evil beasts to each other. And then you have in the evolutionary perspective where we don't have this God, and when we have people have to fight off one side of your being has to subsist, has to fight for survival, and the other part has to defend your family, friends, and fellows and bond with them as the social animal that we are. So what you saw was facts positively aligned with evolution, and therefore a perspective that does not need a God at all. And you seem to have arbitrarily added a God to that. Now, what was the reason for adding a God? And can you define for me also what a God is and why you believe in it?
Well, let's take one question at a time. Deal with the first one, Dani, and then we'll come on to the second one.
Okay.
Can I help you? Because I suspect there's a couple of people who have made this observation in the chat. Your difficulty is that you can't produce what we would describe as objective evidence. What you're relying on is a personal experience. Would that be an accurate way of summarizing your position?
Look, I have to say that I think that as a group, we used to the Bible with one kind of perspective that I have come to realize that was flawed. I don't think that the Bible is a lie like I used to, because I read books of people like people who study history and how they find compelling evidence. So I'm not going to discuss this particular subject because it's not something I know a lot about. But I did read things that made me think that I was wrong about the way that I saw the Bible, and I do think you are wrong about the way you see the Bible.
Okay, well, pause there, Dani. If I may, Dani, just pause you there before you go on, because this is important. Okay, you say that we are wrong in our interpretation of the Bible, and you've got it right. So, in what way are we misunderstanding the Bible? Before we move on beyond that.
Okay, first of all, you have to take the Bible in consideration as a whole, not just parts of it. And a lot of things that many atheists had told me about the Bible, that it was, something bad. I come to realize when I studied by myself that it actually meant something else. You know, a lot of atheists misinterpret the Bible on purpose just to say it's evil. And
Okay, well, I will make sure that I never, ever, ever misinterpret anything on purpose. So let me just jump in here and clarify something. Is it true, then, that you can be forgiven of any sin you ever commit?
see, this is the kind of question that is really out of context.
How is it out of
You're
context? You're telling me that I am deliberately distorting the Bible. I absolutely am not. I would reverse that back onto you, that you have to colorize it in a very different light in order to believe it at all. You have to ignore some very painful things that are there. I'm not saying they're there. I'm not being dishonest about it. You are being dishonest about it by saying they are not there.
Okay.
So, and one of the critical things is that your God will torture innocent people forever for no other reason than they did not believe this hokey book over many other hokey books. And if you believe in the Bhagavad Gita, you can make all the same arguments for taking the Bhagavad Gita as a whole with the Mahabharata and the entirety of the Vedic scriptures. And once you understand all that, you'll be a complete Hindu, and you'll never be confused by these ideas about Jesus. I've heard those kind of arguments too. I have heard people talk about going through exactly the same thing that you're going through, but except that they accepted Buddha.
I think we got.
into their lives.
Hang on, Thunder. It's only fair that we let Dani respond to
I
Aaron's
was
point.
about to say, I like the sound of Dani's voice. Let's hear more of Dani.
Okay, Aaron, first, I don't want to sound like I think you are dishonest. See, this is where we are different in one point, because I feel sorry for you and everyone else for
No need to feel sorry for me. I'm not the one with the affliction.
No, keep going.
I feel sorry. I don't think that you are doing that because you are bad or because you're stupid. I just think that you do that because this is the worldview that you have. So you are going to apply it in everything. So you have a naturalistic perspective of life. You will apply it to the Bible, and you will see what you want to see in the Bible.
Well,
Except that I started out.
Hang on, Aaron. The problem with that, Dani, if I may, is that some of the things that Aaron is referring to, it is very difficult to see how they can be, we are misinterpreting the message. If the message in the Bible states clearly that certain people, for certain infractions of God's desires, will be stoned to death, and examples are given of people being stoned to death in the Bible, and a declaration is made by your God that homosexuals are sinful and will be.
I have one question.
How on earth can you say that we're taking that out of context? That's, I think, the issue that I and Aaron have.
I have just one question. If God does exist, okay, do you think you can morally judge God? Because
Yes.
I don't think you can.
I do. And I
don't
have.
think you can.
And he is a monster. He's a moral monster.
Actually,
You're
I've
not
got,
misinterpreting
guys, I have a different question for you, Dani. If God has a height, can you measure what that height is?
I think we're straying off the point with this.
No.
I
The
do as
point,
well,
the
Thunder.
point. No. The point is that things like height are very easy to quantify. Things like morality are a little more ambiguous, but they can nonetheless be quantified in some way, shape, or form. If you can actually assign a height to God, and if he actually is a corporeal form, then you can. 6 foot 2 3/4. Then you can also judge his morality.
Okay. Do you understand what the message of the Bible is?
Yes. Believe whatever hokey nonsense our priests are trying to sell it to you so that they don't have to get real jobs. And if you don't believe us, then we're going to visit you with a fate worse than death. And if you do believe us, then we're going to give you riches beyond your wildest dreams. But whatever happens, you continue to pay us our tithe today. That's the message of the Bible.
Okay. First of all, the Bible...
Actually, Dani, I'm really
Thunder,
curious.
please.
No, I just...
You've interrupted her
But-
again.
I know, but I want the narrative of what actually changed your mind, right? So you were at one point a non-believer, and then you went to being a believer. And you say this happened over several days. What were the formative matters that changed your mind in this?
Okay. It was many days because it took me a long time to come to this opinion. You know, it wasn't something that I decided one day because I was really emotional about it. Okay, that's what I meant. So yes, I took over, I think over 6 months just reading different books that some of them were criticizing the Bible and others that were trying to explain the Bible.
But there must
read
have come
the Bible, I studied the Bible, and I prayed.
There must
And
have, well, actually, if you pray, by the time you're praying, you've already accepted there is a God, because...
No, because I hadn't accepted God when I
Okay,
prayed.
well, let me visit you with something else then, Dani. Just to throw some contrast on this. You've heard of the Beatles, right? The rock group, the Beatles?
Yes.
Okay. Their lead guitarist, George Harrison, remained a Hindu throughout his entire life. Most of the Beatles were at one point, but Harrison kept that for lifelong. And he said that when you pray, when you, with your whole heart, to Krishna, when you deliver the mantras to Krishna, you could actually generate God consciousness, where you would not only hear Krishna's audible voice, but be able to see him, feel him, laugh with him, and talk with him like a regular friend. It's possible to do this once you get to the point that you're praying to it. As a matter of fact, it's possible to do that with dead relatives and a number of other things that don't really exist.
Okay.
Dani, can I, if you want to come back on that, then please do. But what I'd be interested in, if I may, is just let's cut back a little bit and get to basics. Can you describe for us the characteristics and qualities of your God? Is it? Let me see if I can help you out there a little bit. Is it a physical entity? Does it exist in a material way? Does it have the capacity to perform miracles, to listen to and to answer prayer? Give us an idea of this, the entity that you have been praying to.
First of all, I would like to talk a little about the comments. Yes, people can make themselves feel a lot of experiences by praying, meditation, and whatever. But my decision wasn't based only on a feeling, especially because I never really heard God's voice or had any really strong experience with praying. The only thing that I have ever felt is like feeling more peaceful. And, you know, I never had a really supernatural experience from praying. So it wasn't that which made me change my mind, because I knew a lot of things about people who would make themselves feel things and believe in things because they were like doing some kind of action that would cause that. So it wasn't that.
Dani, most sexual fantasies make people feel better, but that doesn't mean that those sexual fantasies are real in any way, shape, or form.
Yeah, and more to the point, you did tell us last time that these people showed you evidence and that the evidence was compelling. And you named that it was something in the book of John, which I have a hard time finding that you could take anything out of the Bible as evidence of the Bible because it's a circular argument, but I'm still keen to hear what it was that changed your mind and how what you once declared to be evidence you now tell me isn't what I would consider evidence. What evidence do you have, and does it fit anybody's definition of evidence?
Okay, so it's not evidence. I really don't care.
Okay, no evidence.
Okay, that's fine.
Evidence.
That's fine. It's not evidence. Oh, okay, we've finally dealt with that one. Can we go back? Can we go back, please, though, to my question, if I may?
Okay.
Describe the entity that you pray to. Give us an idea of its physical entity characteristics and its, as I say, the powers that it has, like the questions I asked before.
Does he have a nice butt?
Oh, thunder, please, for God's sake.
He is above everything. It's a personal God, okay, which made man out of love, and
yet he does all those things that were done in the Bible. That's amazing. How do we counter such contradictions?
See, God is God, so whatever he does, I mean, I won't...
So we could just make excuses for whatever. So if God says that slavery is moral, then slavery becomes moral, and killing your neighbors and molesting their children, all of that is okay because Exodus 31 says it was okay, so that makes it okay because God said it's okay, and God sets morality, so whatever evil it is, whether it's hamstringing horses or slaughtering your neighbor's children or his animals or burning his village down, all of that's moral, according to God, right?
See, that's the part where I think you are reading the Bible the way you want. Because I don't read,
I think it's quite the reverse here. I think you have to ignore gargantuan portions of the Bible in order to find the one or two one-liners that look nice on a bumper sticker. The Bible is full of evil. I can't find
the Bible is full of evil because of man, not because of God.
Who wrote the Bible?
Because men were God. Because men were evil in that time.
Who was it?
Men
Who was it
for those
that,
evil things.
Who was it that ordered the Midianites to be slaughtered? Was it God or was it man?
Spoiler, it was God.
Who was it that mandated slavery? Who was it? Did man make the rules to allow slavery, or did God make the rules to allow slavery?
Man made man.
So the Bible is not written by God. The Bible was written by men, and one of the purposes of the Bible is to justify slavery that was not endorsed by your God. Is that what you're telling me? So are you saying
slavery? God does not justify slavery, but he also doesn't say it's something bad.
Wait. God didn't put down in Exodus 27 the rules for how to keep slaves? God didn't endorse slavery?
At that time. People had slaves at that time.
Okay, at that time. So God's eternal being, lasting forever, the eternally being gave a price for human beings in shekels. And is this God saying this?
Okay, why is it hard for you to understand that God has to give different directions and explanations to different people in different times?
Is there ever a time? Is there ever a time when slavery is morally justified?
I think also, Dani, just to, whilst you have a moment to think about the slavery question, I think you're being somewhat disingenuous if you say that the Bible does not contain direct commandments. And I've only got as far as Leviticus, and there's so many I could use. For example, the stoning of a blasphemer, which appears in Leviticus 24:10.
The man for picking up sticks.
Well, I was just about to come to that if you hadn't interrupted me, Thunder. It says
like
quite clearly, the Lord made it clear to them what they should do. Thunder's example about the person picking up sticks. Again, this is Numbers 15:32. It's abundantly clear if you read that up 32 to 36 that God actually commanded it. How is it that you are saying that we are misinterpreting what the Bible says when it is quite clear? There is no issue about context here.
Or maybe an even clearer example, Danny. Is it ever okay to kill a newborn baby? A helpless newborn baby. Is it okay to kill a newborn baby? Let me rephrase that slightly. Is it okay for God to kill a newborn baby? Is that ethical if God kills a newborn baby?
I do not judge God ethically because
We can, because we
Well,
have a standard.
Hang on. Wait a second.
Okay.
I want to hear that.
Okay, let's just understand this, okay? God is the reason why we are alive. He had mercy on us. And
Mercy. He had mercy
wait.
on all those
Danny.
who drowned in the global genocide.
And what it says,
Danny, he created the forbidden fruit, put it in the garden, put two supposedly immortal beings in the garden with that, told them that they had to eat. So there's obviously death there, but we have to interpret that there's no death and that they had to eat or else they would die. We have to ignore a whole bunch already.
I would
And
like
then
to
he
bring
puts
this-
in a serpent, which Christians interpret to be the devil, the Lord of lies. God put the Lord of lies against the two most naive people imaginable because they didn't know the difference between right and wrong, and then he punished them and us and everything in existence because they found out the difference between right and wrong. Does any of this make sense to you?
I mean, it seems from what you were saying, Danny, or what you were about to say before, unfortunately you were interrupted, the gist of it seemed to be, well, God made you, therefore he can break you. And he will, if he so decides, and we can't judge him for doing that. So we can't say that he was wrong, having created mankind, to then wipe it out with global genocide. This seems to be your point.
I mean,
Thunder, she hasn't spoken for a while. Please, let her address
Sure.
that point.
Okay.
Is that what you're basically saying? God, whatever God does is good because he basically made us all and he can do whatever he wants, and we're not in a position to criticize him. That seems to be your position, yes?
well, I do feel a little uncomfortable judging a being which is above everything and knows everything. I mean, I
obviously
don't
he
feel like I
doesn't.
can judge
Aaron,
that.
let her finish.
Okay, so
I'm sorry. Go on. I don't think we can judge that.
But you don't have any problem judging other people. So if people kill a newborn baby, that would be wrong. Yes.
That would be wrong.
But if God does it, then you're not willing to say whether that's right or wrong.
Okay, we have rights and wrongs for society. Like, I wouldn't like to live in a society where people do this. That's one thing. Do I think it's a sin? That's another question, okay? I wouldn't like to live in a society where people kill newborn babies. But is that a sin? Only if God says it is a sin. And only man can sin. God doesn't sin.
okay, let me get
So,
that
hang
point.
on,
Wait. No, this is important.
One at a time.
Okay.
Aaron
I
first.
mean, God is infallible. God can't sin, right? And God is the one that laid out what the 7 deadly sins are, right? Right?
God can sin because a sin is I don't know the word in English. It's like
Are
you're
you
doing
familiar?
something. You're doing something to God. You are doing something bad to God.
Okay, so
that is a sin.
when God says what the 7 deadly sins are you familiar with what the 7 deadly sins? You familiar with that? Do you know of them? Have you ever heard of them?
Yes.
Okay. Do you know what some of them are? Like vengeance is a deadly sin, and jealousy.
Yes,
and
those things
vanity.
Created by, there is no deadly
Falling.
sins in the
Okay,
Bible.
so those are sins, right? Jealousy, vengeance, wrath, these are sins, right? Right? According to God, those
No.
are sins. Those are some of the 7 deadly sins, right?
Okay, there is. I'm not a Catholic. I don't believe there are deadly sins. Okay, this is something the church made up.
Wait,
That
how do
doesn't
we
make
know
any-
that all of it isn't stuff the church made up?
Because
Is there
some
anything
of
that-
the things in the Bible.
Okay, yeah, it's in the Bible. So the church could just make up stuff and put it in the Bible? Because we don't have Catholic Bibles here. But I've got that passage in other Bibles too. So are you saying that there's only certain versions in which I won't find these? Do you have a Bible that does not have a mention of the 7 deadly sins in it?
Let me say what I think about sins. Okay.
Can you answer that question first? Are the 7 deadly sins in every version of the Bible?
I've got 5 in mine.
I mean, it's not like select Bibles where the church just made up this passage or that passage and then stuck it into God's infallible word, because God only has so much power. He only has so much editing capability, and his voice is so still and small that everybody confuses him for saying something else. And that's why we have all these different denominations. And that's why nobody can agree on what the hell God even is, or what he wants, or who he hates. But we do have the 7 deadly sins in every single Bible. So we have that some of these
This is
sins.
so funny because you're so mad at God. And
I'm not
and
mad
like,
at God. I'm not mad at God any more than I am mad at Cinderella's evil stepmother. Man, I hate that bitch. You remember the Disney movie Cinderella's Evil Stepmother? Boy, I hated her. She's a fictional
wait a
character.
second. I have to answer phone call. Just a second. Oh.
Whilst we're waiting for Dani to come back, I have to say that I find this one of the most irritating. Oh, you're back. Okay, I'll wait.
I'm sorry, guys. I have to go.
Well, Dani, before you go, can I just raise one matter with you, if I may? It is abundantly clear that you have been told or persuaded by someone or some people that you are not in a position to judge God. I think that you should very seriously look at that and look at those that have told you and consider why it is they have told you. It is one of the greatest scams of all time. God cannot be questioned. God cannot be judged. It is one thing that maintains people in their religious beliefs more than any other, I imagine. On that, I wish you well, and please feel free to come back on a future show. I will give you the last word.
Okay. The people who have not, they didn't indoctrinated me, but they did talk to me about this and help me to find answers, were not from the church. They were not priests. They were friends. So don't worry. They were not like trying to be doing a scam. They are not Christians that do bad things and like to judge others. They are just really nice Christians. But I thank you for listening to me, and I know that you guys disagree with me, and I understand. I promise I understand, and I forgive everyone in the chat which said
How
bad
dare
things
you?
about me.
How dare you be so pretentious? You forgive me for what? Disagreeing with you?
I forget. No, I was talking about the people in the chat because some of them said some bad things. But I want to thank you guys for talking to me, and I hope we can do this another time again.
Is that a promise? Can we set a date on that? I'm serious. I am really serious, because every time I get a theist where I can actually talk to her, and start to figure out then I get these excuses. And the worst of the excuses that I get is that, suddenly I hate God. Why? Because I asked a question you can't answer. It's so irritating that you then pawn it back on me, that it's somehow my fault that you don't know how to answer the question, or that you can't answer the question because it undermines your entire belief system. It's not my fault that you can't answer the question. I'm not angry at God. I'm trying to reason with a human being who I find in an unfortunate position.
Okay. I'm sorry for saying that. I know that it wasn't a really nice thing to say. I'm sorry.
Okay, well, we'll catch up with you again soon. We've got to bring the program to a close soon, but thank you very much for the call. It's been very interesting. Just briefly going back to that point, it ranks highly amongst the criticisms that are often made against theists, atheists. The other one being, you can have no morals without God. But this idea of why are we angry at God, or why do we talk about so much about a person that we don't believe in? I'm sorry, that's missing the point. What we're angry with is, well, in my view, I speak for myself, I'm angry that people actually buy into this, and I can't get over to them just how ridiculous their views are, even though that it's being exposed so clearly, in my view. They just don't get it. That's what angers me. It's the power of the concept of religion that it has over people. That's what I get frustrated about. Someone else.
Yes, and I completely agree with you, DPR, when as Thunder was pointing out, that it's somehow okay for God to do any despicable thing, no matter how horrible it is, because whatever he does is moral, because that's how much we can't question it. That's beyond the pale. I've nothing to compare that to.
Concordance, you've been very quiet. Do come back and make contact with us again.
And plus, I spend half the time wondering, is she trolling? No, she's not trolling. Man, maybe she's trolling. No, she's not trolling. There's nothing to debate here, because she has no factual basis, and whatever she's got, it's only happening inside her head, and she's very persuaded by it. And what the hell? What are you gonna do? What do you say to someone who believes in leprechauns because when they were a kid they thought they saw one, right?
Well, no, that's not even that. It's somebody was nice to her, and that's what it is. Oh, these people are nice to me. You know what? I know I'm going to get hated for saying this, but I've seen time and again where and it's usually a woman that this happens to, so far as I have seen. I could be wrong, but what I have often seen is it is particularly in a particular age group, that some women will meet somebody that they like, and then they suddenly adopt all of his attitudes, his taste in music and everything, and they start fighting until they go on to the next guy. And then for this certain duration of maturity, they will adopt all of his trends and attitudes and likes, and then change personality accordingly, or change belief systems accordingly. Yeah, a good example of that is when Lindsay Lohan decided that she was in love with this Jewish girl, so she was going to change her religion from Catholicism to Judaism, regardless what either of these religions said about homosexuality. She's going to do this for the sake of her girlfriend. Does anybody? Hopefully, somebody else sees the kind of pattern that I do. I knew it would come off negatively. I'm sorry that it did.
But yeah, what's the old saying, or not that old saying, but what's the good quote? You can't reason someone out of a position they arrived at without reason. And that's kind of what we've been doing here. And that's why I didn't participate. It was pretty clear where Dani is coming from is not a position of reason. She didn't present an argument. She presented a lot of very vague hand-waving. And what's the point? What's the point of engaging with someone like that? They're not prepared to care about whether or not what they believe is true. If they're not prepared to make that one small but vital concession that they only want to believe in true ideas, then how are you ever going to approach some sort of commonality?
If I may, this goes back to what I was asking, and Aaron addressed briefly earlier on in the show, which is, how do you get across to these people? Your position seems to be somewhat fatalistic, in that you're saying there's no point in even attempting. I think there is a point, because obviously no one will convert without reason, whether it's one way or the other. There must be some arguments, even if it is a very gradual progression that is made. There are some arguments that must kick home. There is something, surely, that she will go away with and she will question and think about, and perhaps Well,
No, but that's the point. She's not going to. The belief system requires confirmation bias. And so she's going to say, well, these people were very nice to me, therefore they're right.
well,
It doesn't matter that
perhaps we should be nicer to theists.
Yeah, but you know what?
Why do we
I
want
figured
more?
out. I have figured out that in arguments with scientists, I was upset with one in one instance where this guy proved me wrong in an argument. It was a very heated debate, probably the worst debate that I've ever had in my life, and it was with a scientist, an atheist scientist, and he was a complete asshole, really, really disrespectful. And the sad thing is that in the end he was right, and despite that he was a complete dickhead, his charm was not the thing that won me over, and so it made it harder for me to admit to him that he was right, but eventually I did. So I mean, I would rather take the course that no, I'm not gonna schmooze you or seduce you into believing what I do. No, I'm going to convince you with the facts, or I'm going to give up.
But this is the point.
Well, you first, Concord. Stu, go on.
This is the point, though, and I don't want to be misinterpreted here. I didn't get from Dani that she cared if it was true or not. It was true for her, and that's all she seemed to care about. And I'm just saying you cannot argue with someone who doesn't care whether or not things are true, right? True objectively. And you saw that when you started asking about objective facts or objective evidence. Suddenly there's the backpedaling. Well, I can't give you objective evidence. Well, okay, then what are we talking about? My opinion versus your opinion, or my delusion versus your delusion. Where is the progress? I'm not fatalistic. I'm not giving up. It's just I don't want to waste my time on someone who you can't convince. There's no way to convince someone who doesn't care if they're holding the true position, or they actually care about facts. If they don't care about facts, why would you present facts? Why would you try to reason with someone who doesn't value reason?
And it goes right back to what we were talking about at the beginning of the show, or maybe just prior to the beginning of the show, when we were talking about how the belief system defends itself by plugging the ears and closing the eyes, and things that a scientific perspective would not do. None of us as scientists should ever do that.
This goes back to what I consider to be the frightening thing that she said towards the end, or the gist of it was, you're not allowed to question God. We're not in a position to do that. This is a wonderful system, defensive mechanism that religion has exploited throughout the years. And in fact, I even include this comment in my deconversion story, you can call that. I left or lost any religious beliefs when I was about the age of 9. But in the years leading up to that, the one thing that probably scared me most, or the one message that resonated as I started doubting this stuff that I'd been told, was do not question God. That is sinful to question God or God's existence. And what a wonderful, powerful weapon it is that the religious have exploited that. And unfortunately, Dani seems to have bought into it. She doesn't consider that she is in any position to question the morality of God, and I presume also to question the existence of God. Did anyone else experience that sort of indoctrination when they were religious?
Oh yeah, I was told all the time as an 8-year-old boy. I was told, "How dare you question God? We are not, ours is not the reason why. Ours is but to do or die." I was told not to question. I was not supposed to understand anything, and I was just supposed to take it on authority and leave it and believe it completely, and that be it.
Imagine a scientific approach that said, "Thou shalt not question Newton. It's sinful to question Newton." We wouldn't have our GPS systems now, would we? We wouldn't. None of Einstein would have been stoned. Einstein would have been stoned to. Oh, hello. Lights are going out all over the place. Einstein would have been stoned to death for questioning Newton, wouldn't he?
I remember as a young boy sort of deriving a certain sort of Pascal's wager in my head about prayer. Like, I'm not sure I really believe, but it seems like it would be a good idea to throw it out there just in case. And I bet a lot of people do that. People who sort of are struggling with doubt, and whichever side of the fence they fall on, whether they consider themselves a believer or non-believer, they struggle with this sense of, well, what if I'm wrong? What if I'm wrong? And I think that's probably the kind of thing where you fear these outcomes. That's what makes that concept so effective for proselytizing. Is what if you are wrong, right? What if the stakes are so high? You know, eternal torture. That's a terrifying concept. But that's why you have to be that much more skeptical, because it's obviously designed to play on the weaknesses of the human mind.
Oh, now there's someone in the chat. Rambo 61 is rejecting non-Newtonian physics. Oh, I don't know whether that's going to see him into heaven or hell. I don't know.
Apostate.
I realise that we're up to the 2 hours. We don't have anyone wanting to speak to us, and no one sent me a question. So we'll.
And now the power is going off, and I think
yeah.
that
Well,
perhaps
no,
we should take that as a sign.
Yeah, I suppose there are people who will think that the fact that one of my light bulbs was blown during the course of this sacrilegious conversation is a sign. And in fact, somebody actually,
I think it was because
said that the lightning striking the Vatican when the Pope said he was going to resign is evidence of God. I don't know whether we can...
I really hate to say this, but maybe also a snack. I got a really important call that came through that I had to take. How did it end up with Dani? Is she one of us again, or is
No, she's a Hindu now. She's Hindu.
Was she trolling after all, or not?
No, I think she's.
I don't know. We'll take a thumbs up, thumbs down from the audience. I have to say that my view is that she's not trolling. Thumbs up if you think that Dani is a troll and she's not being serious. Thumbs down if you think she is being genuine.
I think she's being genuine only because we eventually got her to cave that there in fact was no evidence involved.
Yeah, the majority are saying that she was being genuine.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Because the other really weird thing is that people who decide that there's God don't usually come to arenas where their beliefs can be challenged. It's actually really weird.
Well,
Yeah,
no,
but
it happens.
it does happen. But the one thing I would say is that
Come on,
she's
though. I
very
mean,
clearly in the early days of her conversion, because she quite clearly has not read the Bible. She's not aware of its contents, and no doubt her very friendly Christian chums who have led her down this direction will ensure that she doesn't read it, and those bits that she does read are the cherry-picked nice bits, I guess.
Well, no, she had the sort of stock argument that you don't judge God, and therefore you don't have to worry about anything. But
Yeah, she wasn't. She didn't know about the 7 deadly sins, for example. She thought that was a Catholic thing,
or that you actually had to. Reading the Bible wasn't good enough. You had to read it as a whole, which is another great way of kicking the ball into the long grass.
you have to read it in the spirit. Read between the lines. Don't read the lines so much.
Yes, when it says quite clearly, someone that does this must be stoned to death, and God actually gave that command. No, that's us taking it out of context. How can you take that out of context? It's in black and white.
She also mentioned how God only condones slavery at certain times, except of course he didn't, because the New Testament condones slavery too, and never reverses its position on that.
Yeah, I mean, I also had a sort of raised an eyebrow at the Bible was a product. Everyone had slaves at the time. Well, so if the Bible had been written in the time of the Nazis, then gas chambers would have just been okay because everyone was doing it.
So that's the is-ought fallacy, isn't it?
Yeah.
My wife is the expert on logical fallacy. She has them all archived in her head and can label them all at will.
Anyway, on that note, I'll come around for you for final comments before we close down. A few announcements. Just to remind people, these videos will be posted on to YouTube within about 48 hours. Now, again, I'll just take a straw poll if I can. I tend to, so far as the videos are concerned, I tend to sort of like cut them into 1 hour videos because I think no one sits down and watches an entire 2 hours. But thumbs up if you prefer it in 1 hour bits, or would you like the whole thing posted in one go? On YouTube. Thumbs up if you want it all in one go. Thumbs down if you want it in 1 hour clumps. Doesn't matter. All one go. Okay. Well, it saves me time. Not a problem. I just remind people though that if you don't want to sit down and watch it on YouTube, you can now download the shows either from the iTunes page. From the website on the iTunes page, or we also, for those that don't like iTunes, have a feed burner link, so you can get the whole show as an MP3 file and listen to it at your leisure. The best place to access those is from our website, which is dead easy to remember, www.magicsandwichshow.com, and you'll see pages there that it's under iTunes. Go to there and you can download it. Again, that normally should be up and running within 48 hours, so you can do that if you like. I normally say thank you to either Ben or Tony at this stage. I don't have to because I did it. I apologise for my echoing audio at the beginning, but I understand it got better later on. So that's, I think, all I have to say. Let's take it in turn. Should we do it alphabetically? AronRa.
Please don't visit me with the curse of Jason Burns ever again. Okay, well, yeah, the only announcement I've got is that I think it's 2 weeks from now, on March 9th, I have the honor of opening what I think is the first annual convention of the National Atheist Party in the San Francisco Conference Center in San Francisco, California. I will be on at 9 a.m., so I'm told. So if you happen to be in the city and you want to see me, it's an early start, so I don't expect to be a huge audience for myself. But I think it's quite an honor to host a convention for a political party, and they are in considering changing their name to make a more broad appeal. So I'll throw that out there too. Next.
Well, just before I move on, also there's something else that needs to be announced. I think it's actually in 5 weeks' time, around 5 weeks' time, is the American Atheist Convention in Austin, and it does actually appear very likely that I'll be there. So if anyone is going to be in Austin in 5 weeks' time, come along. I'm hoping definitely to meet Aaron, Concordance, hopefully yourself for the first time. That'll be something to look forward to. Concordance.
So I've already got a video up on my first edition of gun control. I originally had thought it would be a trilogy, 3 videos on the topic, but it looks like it's going to stretch out much longer than intended. So I'm having to break the videos up even further.
I've got to say, that's suicidal. This is the third rail. I'm curious, what sort of reception is it getting? Because I've not seen it yet.
Pretty positive. I regret making any reference to, the U.S. militias versus the federal army, the federal military, because that's all anyone wants to talk about is whether or not, a group of plucky young Wolverine-esque militia members could overthrow the U.S. military. And I don't want to have that discussion. That was not the purpose. The purpose was that, to discuss in the Second Amendment whether or not it particularly mattered whether or not Joe Bob owned a bazooka or not, whether or not, say, that the government became oppressive or tyrannical, or whether North Korea invaded. I don't think North Korea is all that worried about Joe Bob and his bazooka. I'm sure it.
It looks as if we've just, whilst we're waiting for him to come back.
Oh, I'm sorry. No. I just, my mouse hovered over the mute button. Anyway, I didn't want to get bogged down in that. So I'm moving on beyond the whole collective defense argument. We're going to start focusing more on policy and culture and the effects and gun violence and personal defense issues. So it's going to get much more heated in the coming videos because I'm going to talk about specific policies. This is a topic very few people are in the middle on. There's just very little middle to be found.
I think that's correct. And before I come to you, Thunder, can I just explain? I note that someone in the chat said gun control. That would be an interesting debate. Thunder, myself, Aaron, and a person whose name at the moment
David Smalley of Dogma Debate.
Dogdom debate had such a debate. I think it was about 2 months ago. It's on his channel or on his blog site. I will include a link in that. It went on for over 2 hours. Thunder and I were taking a position in favour of gun control. Aaron and David were taking the opposing view. I'm told it appears from the comments that the first 40 minutes or so people weren't that interested in it. It was getting a bit out of hand, but the rest of it people thought were quite interesting. So as I say, I'll include a link to that in the description if you're interested in hearing that.
I will admit the concordance presented a much better argument than I did.
Well, I won't comment. Thunderfoot, final words.
Yeah, and the cute thing about that debate is that, people seem to determine predominantly who won these things based on their existing views, which is fine. To an extent we all do that. But the gun control thing does seem to be particularly polarized. I mean, for me, I don't really have that much of a beef with that subject in that I see gun control as, frankly, a minor issue when you compare it to things like education. But
yes,
people get a lot more emotive over gun control. It really is a button issue, particularly in America. When taking the gun away is next the government will be dictating to you when you're allowed to be on the streets and when you're not, that sort of thing. That's the thin end of the wedge. I'm impressed that you've got stuck in there, Concordance. I mean,
yes, and if you've not
you.
watched Concordance's video, it's the first of what appears to be a series, and it's interesting because it starts off dealing with the Second Amendment and constitutional rights, which I have to say I think are somewhat outdated, and I kind of guess that was the gist of what Concordance was saying. Enough, we're not going to talk about gun control now, we'll leave it to a future show. We will be back for our next show on the 10th of March, which incidentally will be my birthday, so make sure you bring cakes and gifts for me, and we will see you in 2 weeks' time on the 10th of March. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. I hope you enjoyed the show. Any comments that you have to make, best thing to do is go to our website and send us an email through there. You can contact any one of us through there. So we look forward to seeing you on the 10th of March. Thank you very much indeed. I was going to say if you could stop the show now, but that's my job, isn't it? Hang on, I'm going to do that. I think.
Don't do it, DPR. You'll kill us all.
Oh no!